Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWire TV interview. I'm joined today by Adam Krebet. He's the Solution Consulting Manager at Workday. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. Really nice to be here and talking with you today.
Great to have you here too. Now, Adam, Workday started in 2005. So can you please recap for us what Workday started by doing back then, and broadly what Workday offers to the market today as we head into 2022?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a much told story in Workday how our founders, Anil Bushri and Dave Duffield, got together in a diner in California and had a discussion about re-envisaging the ERP landscape, if you like. At the time, all of the HR and finance systems that were on the market were on-premise and very big and clunky and cumbersome. And so they had a vision of using the newly emerging concept of cloud to provide a much more agile kind of delivery that would give customers the opportunity to live with the platform and for it to be continually modernized throughout the years. So they started Workday, and importantly, it was built on a foundation that gave, and here I go, umming and ahhing, gave a much more agile kind of delivery of business capability. And that included having transactions and analytics running off the same data without being replicated and working on a point of time. And also a focus on configurability that meant that businesses could change their processes really in an agile fashion without falling into the trap of upgrade nightmares that the industry was experiencing at the time. So if we wind forward the 15, 16 years to now, Workday still uses that same foundation and has modernized it over time and also expanded its product set to include both HR and finance, but also strategic sourcing, employee engagement, and planning so that organizations can use all of those capabilities together in a cloud-based environment. And we support thousands of global organizations from medium-sized enterprises right up to 50% of the Fortune 500. The organization has revenues now of $1.3 billion US dollars in Q3 of this fiscal year, which was a 20% growth. So from the same period the year before. And so that's incredible growth and really reflects the kind of uptake that Workday's had during that time. And we've got a lot of local organizations using Workday, both organizations who are Australian headquartered and maybe global organizations, as well as global organizations who are headquartered elsewhere, who have significant operations in Australia and New Zealand as well.
So Adam, you talked about HR and finance as being some of the things that Workday has expanded on, but what are the latest technologies and developments that have come from Workday in the past 12 months?
Yeah, there's been a lot going on, and particularly in the last 12 months, I think there's been a general recognition that employee experience has just been so vital for all sorts of organizations, with people working from home, with there being a lot of doubts, and with a lot of business transformation happening in that time. So Workday's done a lot of work, for example, in the human capital space, building out capabilities for organizations to be able to better engage their employees, to retain them, make the most of them, and give them as rewarding an experience as possible, which also then leads, of course, through into customer satisfaction and better servicing. So we've done a couple of things there. One is in March 2021, we acquired Peakon, which is an employee engagement platform. And we're integrating that into our broader product set and giving organizations a chance to gain much greater insights into the workforce. And we can maybe talk about that one a little bit more.
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah. We also acquired Zimit, which is an organization that has a really modern quote-to-cash platform. And this is something that we'll use to help customers who are in service industries, such as communications and media, as well as technology and business services, to be able to quote the work that they take to their customers and get a hold on a much better picture of their revenue. And by combining that with Workday's finance management platform, they'll be able to capture and analyze in a much more seamless sort of process what their revenue streams are. And then finally, very recently, we made a definitive agreement to acquire a company called Vendly. Now, Vendly will extend our capability to be able to manage non-employee portions of the workforce. We already are able to manage contractors and other contingent workers in the Workday HCM platform. But Vendly will expand the ability to acquire, onboard, and to be able to manage the revenue associated with contractors, both from staffing kind of organizations, but also individual contractors. And that'll be great for organizations in those industries and extend how much Workday supports them across their business operations. We also had a great deal of penetration with our skills cloud because it's a commonly held understanding that skills are I guess the modern way of looking at the workforce, understanding their capabilities and redeploying them. So the Workday Skills Cloud supports that kind of capability in various areas, including support for gigs, internally posting roles for people to be able to move around, and other things such as enhancing the recruiting process. And then finally, and this is a big one, Workday has established a local hosting within Australia using Amazon Web Services to support organisations who have compelling data sovereignty requirements and need to host their systems onshore.
Yeah, it's a requirement from a lot of countries around the world these days. And also I noticed in the background, there's you're in the workplace, people are moving around, so it's good to see people back at work in a hybrid fashion.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a very hybrid fashion, yes.
Now, there's a lot of talk about the employee experience. You just mentioned just before that Workday acquired Peakon, and you've now launched Workday Peakon Employee Voice. So let's go into this in a little bit more detail. And what is Workday doing from a technology point of view to help customers provide that more engaging employee experience, I guess, beyond simply rolling out Peakon?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things I'd like to mention there. So first of all, Peakon isn't just a survey tool. It's really a place where employees can have a safe place to provide their feedback and to not just answer questions, but really share how they feel about things that are going on within the organisation. And this differs from the kind of information that you get within a typical core HCM system because it provides access to the organisation about the experiential, the opinion, the perceptual side of what employees are experiencing. And when you put that information beside the structured demographic sort of information that comes from an HCM system, you've got the ability to really measure how sentiment impacts and is impacted by strategic initiatives that the organisation is undertaking. So Peakon Employee Voice does a number of things, including giving staff a really safe place to say what they really want to say, but also giving the organisation and managers a way to analyse that information that gets behind the answers and gets to the trends and the drivers behind the employee experience. They can do that in a really closed loop, and the system will provide recommendations about what to do when indicators are not looking so good, and you can measure that against both internal and external benchmarks. So it's a really compelling capability to add to an enterprise HCM cloud-based application.
Well, I've often heard it said, people forget what you said, but they do remember how you made them feel. And so now companies have the ability to get that information and act upon it. And also, I guess it would be helping companies deal with the mental health of their employees, given, it's so much disruption. It must be a very useful tool for companies to now be able to tap into.
Absolutely. Mental health, diversity and belonging are key factors that organizations are looking at as a part of the employee experience, and being able to correlate them with other enterprise initiatives is a really important thing to see how they affect and are affected by those other initiatives that the organisation might be doing. We're also looking at employee experience from the perspective of the user experience, and we're seeing a shift in the way workplaces want to interact with their systems. So in the old days, you used to have to dive into an application. Now we're seeing much more of a trend towards collaboration tools being a focal point for accessing information and being able to take actions in many systems. So Workday has integration with Microsoft Teams and Slack, and we're working on extending that through an initiative called Workday Everywhere. And with Workday Everywhere, we're going to, first of all, partner with Microsoft to integrate Workday with Microsoft Viva connections. And this will allow companies to make a branded, customized experience, which will bring in information and enable their employees to interact with experiences from multiple systems, but within the one place. We're also looking into what other kinds of interactions might be the best for different parts of the best for different clients, such as potentially desktop applications, browser integration, and other kinds of workspace offerings.
And you just mentioned Workday Everywhere, working in conjunction with Teams and Slack. And obviously, there's plenty of information about it on the site. But what's the short version of what Workday Everywhere allows people to do?
Yes, well, Workday Everywhere is really an extension of that idea that started with Teams and Slack integration. It's about bringing collaboration, insights, and information directly into the platforms that people use during their everyday life. So we'll be extending from Teams and Slack into other collaboration platforms, such as Microsoft Viva Connections, which is Microsoft's platform for creating customized, branded interactions that work across multiple systems. We'll also be looking into what other platforms, Workday transactions, information, and conversations can be surfaced into, such as desktop environments, browsers, and others that might be emerging in the future.
Now, this is a bit of a high-level question in the sense that COVID obviously saw a great deal of digital acceleration. Now we've got the Omicron strain. So COVID is still with us, even though it does appear to be less, appears to be mild, even if it's supposedly more transmissible. So in short and, at a high level, how did COVID accelerate the plans, features, benefits, and capabilities of Workday for itself and its customers over the past couple of years of this, COVID situation?
Yeah, COVID certainly brought a focus on the workplace and virtualizing that, but it also really entailed organizations being agile and having to turn on a dime, if you like, to be able to look at information about how their workforce and how their business was performing and be able to model scenarios about how to change that. This is something that's always been the case, but it really got accelerated through COVID. And the agility to be able to do that effectively continues on, because as you mentioned, Omicron's come along. Who knows what the next change will have to be, even after we come out of COVID. So having systems that supported rather than impeded organizations in doing that business planning in a really closed cycle was increasingly important. Now, the cloud SaaS systems are really a great enabler of that if they're built in such a way that they're flexible, they're secure, and you can stay modern with them, that they upgrade with the changes that you need to make. And so Workday was already established with a lot of organizations, over 3,700 organizations in that kind of way. And it enabled those organizations to be really agile. And Workday, of course, uses its own software. And executives speak about the way they had to do a huge amount of business planning and scenario modeling at the start, and also throughout all the different phases of COVID to be able to decide how to move the business forward. A couple of examples that might be useful to sort of bring that to light, and also to pick up on the idea that the way the workforce operates, especially in frontline operations, that was also something that had to transform really strongly during COVID. So one example of an organization that has a lot of frontline facing staff is the Salvation Army. And as I think everybody knows, they have people working with some of the most vulnerable parts of our society. And they're engaged with them really strongly. And they acquired Workday before the pandemic to help reduce administrative burden and manage their workforce across what is a very diverse set of segments that they're working in. But when COVID hit, they had to look at some things really urgently. They've got their own workers who are at risk. Many of the frontline facing workers at the Salvation Army are 65 years or older or over, and themselves are in danger of very negative side effects from COVID. So they were very quickly able to identify those staff members, and with Workday assist in moving them to more administrative tasks so that they were taken out of risk. They were also able to track their requirements around JobKeeper using information out of Workday. So they could, for example, see who their contingent workers were, their unpaid workers who had been with the organisation for 12 months or over, and therefore were in line for JobKeeper payments. They were able to identify also their volunteer and permanent workers to help to redeploy the workforce more generally. Another example is a hospital group based in Sydney that's very well known. And as you can imagine, of course, hospitals were very strongly transformed and had to pivot really quickly to provide COVID-related services. This hospital group has both public and private operations. So not only did they have to take their public carers and retrain them in COVID protocols, but they had to take their private staff and redeploy them to the public sector and to be able to provide COVID services, because elective surgeries were very quickly stopped, as you may remember.
Absolutely.
So in this organisation, they had to be able to, first of all, identify which staff worked where, but also to be able to create cross-training and upskilling capabilities that they could deploy so that they'd be compliant with the new requirements. So they were very quickly able to identify staff who had skills gaps, certification gaps, and other reasons to cross-train them from the private sector into the public sector. Within the course of 10 days, they did that. They uploaded new training materials that had to be provided to those staff members into the Workday system, delivered those, and they also tracked the compliance of the staff against those new training courses so that they could very, very quickly move into providing care for COVID patients.
And so what else is happening at Workday that we haven't spoken about, and with customers that we should know about?
Yeah, there are some really exciting developments coming along. One is that Workday's operated within Australia for quite a number of years, and throughout that time, we've been asked by customers to be able to provide a payroll for Australia. And I'm excited to highlight that we have announced that we will be providing a Workday payroll for Australia. And this will give customers the option to have a fully integrated payroll system that uses all of the advantages that Workday has in its current platform, or to retain existing payroll providers and integrate with them as they've been doing for many years. We've also announced Workday scheduling as an additional product offering, allowing customers in key industries to be able to roster and schedule their workers in a very integrated way with the rest of the Workday platform. And as I mentioned before, we're extending our public cloud offerings so that customers with onshore data requirements will be able to host that data in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, I always like to ask some questions about the person I'm interviewing. So the first one I start with is, can you please share a memory of your first computer?
Oh my gosh. Well, let me start with the first computer I used, which wasn't mine. So during school, I joined a lunchtime computer club. And the first thing we did was we had to program using Mark Sense cards. And for those who are a bit young to remember those, it was those big decks of cards, and you used a pencil to mark the coding language out on the cards. And so, of course, there was a big danger that you'd drop the cards, and over time, the sense that the marks would rub off and your program would be unreadable, so you'd have to rebuild the whole deck. My first computer at home was an Apple II, which was very advanced at the time, and was really an opening for me into the world of programming. That the thing that struck me about it was that programming, even at that time, had migrated from this clunky card-based system to something that was had so much better user experience, and you didn't have to reload it every single time. So that kind of set me on the path to really seeing computers as a way to actually achieve outcomes.
And sort of following on from that, what is a little bit about your own history in the world of tech?
Let's see. So my first programming job was actually during school. Once again, I created a student management system for a local school, not the one I was actually going to. And the program was bigger than the memory on the computer, so I was having to grapple with all sorts of swapping code in and swapping code out, the sort of thing that you couldn't do these days for security reasons. And then my first job was also low-level programming, but I very quickly realized that I wanted to get a little bit more out in front of things. So I moved into the enterprise application space quite early, and it's been an interesting journey and an exciting journey from there to the sorts of machine learning-based capabilities that we can now provide.
And my second last question is to ask if you could please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
Yeah, there's two pieces I'd like to focus on, one positive and one negative. I guess the call to action one, which could be seen as negative, is treat every day as though you're just about to be sacked. This came from a manager of mine who actually used to work in the military, and so it was very real to him, but it kind of showed me that there's urgency in delivering outcomes for people. And then the second one was from the founder of Apple, of course, who said, do what you love. So if you can put the two together, I think it's a great way to build your experience.
Do what you love and don't get sacked.
Yeah. Hopefully in that order.
Yeah, hopefully that's absolutely. So what is your final message to iTWire viewers and readers and your current and future customers and partners?
Yeah, I'd say that picking up on those themes we've spoken about, that change is the constant. So, not just picking platforms and processes that can change over time and adapt to the changing needs that you've got. Being engaged with your vendor as a partner is really important, because they can help you to make sure that you're making the most of what you've already invested in, give you some best practices, and make sure that the vision that you have can come to realization without falling into old traps of fragmenting your IT ecosystem and getting back into that sort of complex stage. So it's really about partnering with all of your providers.
Well, Adam Krebet, the Solution Consulting Manager at Workday, it's been great to talk to you. I wish you an excellent 2022, and I hope we can talk again in the future.
Thanks, Alex. Same to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.